Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother Asar Imhotep with the Madhu Mandela Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture. Today is Thursday, October the 29th, and we have a very, very special and dynamic guest with us, Dr. Wade Nobles, and we will talk about a variety of things concerning the world today in a minute when we return. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Those of you who are listening live, and of course, those of you who are catching the archives. Peace and blessings to you all, and welcome to the Mbongi. And before we move forward on our special show today, just a few announcements. First and foremost, for those who want to support the film Chiana Intu on the relationship between ancient Nile Valley civilization and the modern Bantu cultures, you can go to the Patreon page. That is patreon.com/AsarImhotep, and you can join one of the tiers and help support the film in that way. And if you just want to make a one-time donation, you can go to asarimhotep.com. We got some very good things in the works regarding this film. And for those who are on Patreon, the newly uploaded lecture deals with the Chiana Intu religious foundations, Kalunga, a name for the divine in the Congo, and Ma'at, and I demonstrate how they are one and the same from a linguistic and conceptual perspective. The lecture coming this weekend, this Sunday, is going to be the linguistic relationship between the Congo concept of Inkisi and the word nature. And I'll show you how to do the mathematics on that per se, and to continue that display and the showing of the continuity and the unification of African languages, culture, philosophy, religion, and the like. And this Friday, we will have, the open conversation on the Devil's Advocate. Is going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And the question for the night is, should we let Christianity and Islam into Wakanda? And so this is an open discussion, so you'll be able to get the link and join the panel. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest for the day. And first and foremost, shout out all the Patreon members and all of you, of course, who are in the chat room. But with us today is Dr. Wade Nobles, who is a professor emeritus of Africana Studies and Black Psychology at San Francisco State University, a co-founder and past president of the Association of Black Psychologists, and the founder and executive director of the Institute for the Advanced Study of Black Family Life and Culture. He is the author of over 100 articles, chapters, research reports, and books, including African Psychology Towards Its Reclamation, Reascension, and Revitalization, Seeking the Saku, Foundational Writings in African Psychology, and The Island of Memes, Haiti's Unfinished Revolution. Since 1996, he has co-led the, and I don't know how to pronounce this correctly, but Inimin Nyam project, and he can correct me when he comes on, a unique and special study development project designed to connect Africans from the diaspora with Africans from the continent. And so with that, we welcome to the Mbongi, Dr. Wade Nobles, better known as Dr. Ifagbime Shango Dare, aka Nana Kwaku Berku the First. And are you with us, Baba?
I am. Thank you very much. I didn't hear what you said, but I hope it was good.
All right. I messed up on the name, the project that you have, the Ini or Inim Nyam. How do you pronounce that?
You're in and out, but I think you're asking about the name of the project that Dr.
Yes.
Akbar and I took. It's called Inyam Yam. Inyam Yam means the radiance of the face.
All righty. Hold on one second. Kitty Andrews says there's a bad echo.
From me?
So I don't hear it. So I don't know if it's coming from me or while I was talking, or which shouldn't have happened. But what I will do is when you're talking, I will mute my mic. And then when I'm talking, I'll mute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just clicked on something. I wasn't sure. It said internal speakers. Does that make it better?
Probably.
I hear you better.
Hold on one sec. For those who are listening in the chat room, please let me know if there is an echo currently right now as I'm speaking. So they're saying no echo, no echo, no echo here. We're good. Okay. So thank you all. And, yes, thank you all who were in the chat room for your feedback. I appreciate it. So first and foremost, thank you, Baba, for coming onto the program. Once again, it's been 5 years since you were on here last with brother Dr. Adisa Jamu, and I'm glad to have you back here to share your insights and wisdom. And again, we're very appreciative, of your time on this program.
Yes, I follow your work as much as I can. I think you're one of the contributors to what we need to know and when we need to know
it. You're one of my inspirations. And so, coming out of the Hebrew Israelite tradition, I was consuming a lot of the African-centered works, and yours and Dr. Akbar, and Dr. Ben, and, a host of others were the recommended, works. And it put me in a mind frame to really correctly analyze the traditions from which we came and what we got to do. And so, anything that I do, of course, is always standing on the shoulders of, those who came before me. So like you, Diop, and Benga, and, others, like that. So I appreciate those kind words. So my first question to you is, given the situation that we're finding ourselves in now, in terms of the COVID-19 and how the government shutdowns has affected, many of us in terms of our work, our ability to work and support our families, and the kinds of trauma and anguish that can have on a person and a family. They say, of course, in these hard times, that crime and you know, domestic violence and things of that nature goes up. You know, what can we do to recognize the signs that somebody is going through something and how to deal with that psychologically and spiritually, you know, using the tools, you know, that have been developed in Black psychology?
Yes, let me, if you may, let me ask you to ask that question again, because I want to, if you don't mind,
Okay.
to recognize the transition of Dr. Patricia Newton. And
Yes.
I needed it formally because that energy is something that we're going to be counting on in the future. Now, I have
Yes.
walked with and ate with and drank with and thought with and waged war with Liberation of the African Mind and developed programs with a group of very special people who I consider to be my baobab tree of excellence. People like Kia Bunseki Yafukiao and Baba Credo Mutua, the psychologists like Bobby Wright and Syed Khatib and Jake Carruthers and Asa Hilliard and Bob Williams and Francis Cress Welsing and Erling Piper Manley and Zinga Coppin Warfield and Fred Phillips and Philip McGee and Hilby Cambone and Joe White. These are people that have transitioned, and they were my personal friends and spirit warriors. And now Patricia Newton. I want to say formally that Dr. Patricia Newton Sekhmet was my longtime friend and sister in spirit and in struggle. To speak of her transitioning right now to be among the dwellers of heaven is unexpected and extremely difficult. It has placed me in a continual realm of the shadows. Sekhmet, like Queen Tai, Hatshepsut, Queen Nzinga, Harriet Tubman, Cecil Fatima, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, and Barbara Jordan were fiery warrior supreme intellects. They were beautiful women. They were gentle souls. They were defenders of the race. And above all, they were lovers of our Blackness. We must honor her daily. I would like to sing a praise song for her as I sang for Dr. Frances Welsing. I say, the great word warrior goddess Maya Angelou, who preceded both of them in transition, said, listen to yourself, and in that quietude you might hear the word of God. Maya also said, mighty women have been with us and for us from the beginning of time. And when great souls died, after a period of peace and quietude, peace again blooms slowly and almost always irregularly. Space is filled with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses whisper to us. It whispers, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. At this moment of quietude, as Dr. Newton Sekhmet transitions, listen to her. Listen to her as a mighty Black warrior. Whisper to our souls. Read her thoughts and ideas that bring forth an electric vibration that we sometimes are unfamiliar with. Because Sekhmet lived, our senses of who we are can never be the same. Whisper, Sekhmet, Dr. Patricia Newton, a great, mighty Black woman. She existed. Or maybe we should say, rather than whisper, we should shout out loud that Sekhmet existed. Sekhmet, Dr. Patricia Newton existed. This great and powerful soul will exist forever. Her work and her life is deserving of our praise. Sekhmet, Dr. Patricia Newton is not gone. She is amongst the dwellers of heaven. She is in the invisible realm. She is even more powerful there than when she was here. She continues. Call upon the work, the life, the thinking of Dr. Sekhmet Patricia Newton.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you for allowing me.
No problem. I was going to transition into her in the context of the Hoppy film, because as much as I am well read and know of a lot of scholars all over the world, I personally did not hear about Dr. Newton until I got involved with the Hoppy film. And I'm embarrassed to say that, but it's the truth. So I'm still learning, of her works. And I wanted you to, before we go back to the first question, tell us a little bit about her concentration and her contributions to the field and to the African American and just African world community.
Yes, I think people could find her, and they should be doing it. But Sekhmet was a psychiatrist, and she actually helped to bring psychiatry and psychology, this as Black people practices it, to understand our spirituality, to understand that there's traditional thought and beliefs and even sciences that come from our traditional history that we should be rescuing and using today. She also specialized in looking at the anatomy of the brain. As a psychiatrist, she was very concerned with things like epigenetics and how the functioning of our genetic of our DNA can shift, doesn't change, can shift based upon historical experiences. And so she guided us into re-looking at, and we haven't done this well yet, but re-looking at what was the actual trauma that we experienced, a historical trauma that we experienced for being enslaved for 400 years. She also guided us and encouraged us to look at what's the contemporary psychic terrorism that we exist every day, and what does that look like in terms of our ability to function as powerful African people.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'll have some more people who knew her personally, on the program to talk about her. And I know Dr. Ma'at, had a good tribute to her the other night. And I encourage, those of y'all who are familiar with Dr. Oya Ma'at to go to her YouTube channel and see the tribute that was done for Dr. Newton.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think it's very important, but I also don't want us to default into believing that our duty is to pay tribute after these folk. All those folk I named as my baobab tree have transitioned. And does no good to give tribute to them after they have transitioned. You should be able to think about and praise and understand and digest their work while they're living, and then also be sensitive enough to hear the messages they send to us from the afterlife, because they're not gone. They will be waking us up. They were putting ideas in our minds, whispering our ears. We have to see that reality as being real and use that, because our the genius of our baobab forest is far greater than the living baobab trees that we walk around today with. So we want to get the full story, get the living, but also get the afterlife as well.
Indeed. And which I guess leads me to one of the questions I had for you. Because of, I guess it really just kind of depends on your circles and what you read to know, who's who in any particular, field or whatnot. And, we know some of the giants that, have transitioned and those who are still among us. But in regards to the continuation of an expanding of Black psychology and the understanding of the African mind, who are some people that we should be looking for and paying attention to that, that you feel are making their mark or giving us new understandings of ourselves, in that tradition that was, set by the people in your baobab tree?
That's an important question. And I want to handle it slightly different. I think we have to recognize that we are in family conversation, intergenerational family conversation. And so while we're kind of programmed to say, who are the next rising stars coming up? I want to peep who they are. The fact of the matter is that intergenerationally, we are working together all the time. And so there are folk that any one of us, Naeem can say, here are the people that I'm working with intergenerationally. I can do this, and I'll do that. I can do the same, but all of us can. So it's not like there are generations, and now the old school brothers and sisters put them aside because the new breed are coming up. No, we're working together, and so and even like I said, even in my transitioning, I'm gonna still be working with you, and so you can't say it's over. So there are some folk that we should begin looking at, and there's some ways that we're trying to formally encourage that. But I can look at and name folks like Jermaine Robinson down at FAMU, and T. Owens Moore, and Derek Wilson, and Kevin Washington, Cheryl Grills, Theopa Jackson is the current national president of the Association of Black Psychology. There's Izamari Obasi, Camilla Woodson, Sean Utsi. I'm giving you this for folk to go do the work. Go find out what is Sean Utsi doing, and then get in conversation with him. Look at these people and begin to talk about who are the folk that are following Bill Cross's work. Who are the folk that are following Asa Hilliard's work? Who are the folk that are picking up Kobe Cambone's thinking? And then have this conversation. It's a family affair, and it's a family conversation. So we got to begin to engage them. And none of the folks that I've named, all the members of ABC, but none of the folk I named are so highfalutin that they won't talk to you. In fact, the real value before COVID came of our national convention is that folks came and they were sitting and drinking and talking and thinking with what they thought were the big stars, regular folk. And in fact, from my experience, I learned just as much listening to the youngest as I do listen to the oldest, because it is in that dynamic. And I want to come back to this to all my baobab forests that are in the afterlife. They haven't stopped. Sometimes you wonder where that idea come from, or you think when you start reading, well, Asa Hilliard said that 20 years ago. It's not Asa Hilliard said 20 years ago. Asa Hilliard is whispering in your ear right now to pay attention to it. So we got to recognize that there's a whole battery, particularly in Black psychology, there's a whole battery of young, middle, older folk who are in dialogue with each other, who are attempting to formally transfer our wisdom traditions. It all ain't correct. We are rescuing our stuff. So some of the stuff that we have needs to be washed with a scrub board, because it's still got a lot of dirt in it. But we that's our job to do.
Yes, because like when you're in conversation with like Dr. Greg Carr, and of ASCAC, and he's always talking about and trying to remind us of genealogies. Yes. That there's a line in which from mouth to ear that information and wisdom is being passed. And so that question is in that vein, in terms of the genealogy coming up from the past and to now, so that the younger generations, of course, knowing the living elders who are still doing it now, but also know who's in that genealogy. Right. And I'm always concerned with that, because, like, for example, when you look at the work of the destruction of Black civilization, Chancellor Williams, right? Now, he went and did work for 17 years doing primary research in Africa. Of course, because of his health and him going blind, he had a 3-volume work in mind, but he had to reduce it and do a summary, and that's what became the destruction of Black civilizations, or African civilizations. And so, but I was wondering, like, who was going to continue that work? Who has his notes? Yes, yes. And that always concerned me, like, with Dr. Blueprint for Black Power,
Amos Wilson.
Dr. Amos Wilson, that work was produced after his death, but he had somebody to continue and put together the work in his writings and complete the book. And so this genealogy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
For us to learn that in fact there are lineages and there are genealogies of African scholarship. The problem we have to be careful of is that our lineages end up thinking they're supposed to compete with each other. So there are folk running around now saying they're Nobelians. There are folk around saying they're Akbarians. There are folk around saying they're Mbongi. And that's okay because hopefully they're studying our work. But then they want to say, is the Nobelians better than Akbarians? Is the Akbarians better than and we end up doing that because we're contaminated, we're infected by a Western grand narrative of how we're supposed to relate. And what we should be doing is relating where we complement each other and not compete with each other, where we complete each other's work and not disregard it. And we should also begin to think about, this is hard, how we make sure our families know who we are. Because too often when someone transitions, their family don't know these scholars, these students they were hanging out with, because that was their job. And so then the families want to hold on carefully in protecting of their work and not realizing it's a gift to give that work to the next generation because you know they will honor it. But right now we're in this contaminated reality where if I die, my children want to protect my work and they don't know who Asa Imhotep is. Who's knocking on my door talking about, can he get all my writings to work with them? You see, so we're building in failure factors because we don't do this as a family. We get individual scholars loving, liking, talking to each other, but we don't know each other's children. We don't know each other's spouses. We don't know, and they don't know us, so they can say, I respect Imhotep. I know he will do well with my father's legacy, and then help you to go to take that further. That's a lesson that we need to learn and correct. It's not done yet. It's not done yet. All the folks, Dr. Ben Yakanan, people ended up having arguments with their families about what should happen to their work because we didn't know the family. So we got to not. It can't be individual scholars. This got to be a family affair. Everything be a family affair. We got to figure out how to do that. But I don't think we've done it well yet. But we got to figure out how to do that so that we can know that the next generation can pick up something. 1s and 2s and 3s of those junior next generations can be gifted with the responsibility to continue the line of this great thinking.
Indeed. And so speaking of, lineage and purpose, what is the next level of our work, our collective work? And how does Black psychology play a role in that future, in the realization of those ancestral goals?
Yeah, see, I think it's okay to talk about next steps because that allows you to have managed stuff. You don't want to bite off too much. So just give me the next step. But the fact of the matter is that we have to see, for me, we have to see what happened to us. And then how do we correct that? African people were not just colonized and not just enslaved. We were victims of a premeditated act of dehumanization to make us function not as divine human beings. So the work is, how do we rescue and reclaim our divinity? How do we walk in the world as spirit beings with an African face? And that means that we have to look at our so-called disciplines. What's the role of the psychologist in that task? To reclaim our humanity, what I'm calling our spiritness. What's the role of the sociologist, the archivist, the historian, the policeman, the banker, the fireman? All these categories have a responsibility because we essentially function in a way that is debilitating because we've internalized their thought, and their thought has debilitated us. So the next step is to remind, maybe the next step and the continuous step is to remind us what the game is. The game is to claim our divinity, to walk in the world as divine human beings, and then to create family structures, business enterprises, political regimes, etc., that are driven by our sense of what it means to be human. So even right now, we're going to have a major election, and Black folk are running around. Who do I vote for? The fact of the matter is, and I don't want to say this aloud, but I will. I will. The fact of the choices between a savage and a domesticated beast. Now, who do you vote for? You see, so you got to think about they're both dangerous, but I think I can lean the beast towards my will if he had some sense of humanity. The savage can't be doing nothing but to engage them.
Hmm. Yes. And, I guess this kind of leads back into my first question. And that is, given the recent, events that happened, back home in Philly with the young man who was shot. Now, from the testimony of the mother, he was going through a mental crisis, and they called an ambulance, but instead the police came. And by not having, training along those lines, first and foremost, dealing with African people and the triggers and stressors, that can make us, go off the deep end, and just dealing with, and I know you don't like the term mental health, but the wellness, the lack of wellness that is going on in certain aspects of our community, having, like, I would like to see, at least in our neighborhoods, having, the ability to dispatch in situations like this some of our, trained, African-centered Black psychologists to be the first responders,
Yes.
To try to communicate and deal with them,
Yes, that's critical, and I don't mind using the language mental illness because it's a language of commerce. You got to speak the language other folks understand. but with this COVID-19, for me, the first thing to do is to recognize that the COVID-19 is one half of a dual pandemic. The second pandemic is white supremacy 1619. And that's an airborne disease. And so when we look at this white supremacy 19, and my son or my daughter is having a psychiatric break, the people who come are infected with white supremacy 19. They don't see somebody that is ill, they see somebody that's a criminal. Because their mindset, this white supremacy, places all Black people in the category of criminality and wrongdoers. So we Black psychologists have to begin to provide the instruments and the concepts that we should then impose onto these systems that interact with our people to say, this is what you need to recognize. That you can't simply say that what they always say, he did something and I feared for my life. That's a ruse. You didn't fear for your life. Your white supremacy savagery ignited the gene of death and destruction, and you acted out accordingly. So we have to begin to have big, large conversations, hopefully with ABC and Black psychologists in that conversation in terms of focus groups and conversations in that community about what's really going on. Because we think that sometimes we think that it's just, it's prejudice and racism, and if we can just show them that we're okay, they wouldn't do these savage things. It's deeper than that. And so we got to look at that, and why I halt a little bit about giving these diagnoses. I don't think, since we haven't rescued our own episteme, our own philosophical grounding, we don't know what Black crazy is. We don't know what is insanity coming out of a Black framework, a Black paradigm. So the best we can do is try to take their diagnostics and say, given their diagnosis, this person is bipolar, or this person is schizophrenia, or this person has deep depression. They may be having those because we've been infected by the Western mindset, but there's other stuff going on that we don't know, that in my mind is more important to unpack. So the work to do is to get our diagnostics, our classification systems, our ability to identify when somebody is in difficulty from an African perspective, and then write the prescription and the treatment modalities that are tied to that. Let me give you an example that's very recent, like almost yesterday. Okay. We've been talking about how do we look at the fact that all our clinicians, all our therapists have been trained in essentially a white psychology, and almost to the man or woman, they come out and say, I have to undo what I learned in school in order to better work with Black people. I can't use what my professors taught me straight up. I got to undo it. And so Dr. Goddard and I at the Institute for a long time ago suggested, what if we could create a therapist in residency activity based in the Black community, where the conscious Black therapists train the next generation of therapists in how to work with our people. A therapist in residency. Now that's a new kid on the block. But what it opens up is that we have an opportunity to not only say this is what the therapeutic session looks like. For example, we're trained in the therapeutic session to bring someone to my office. I got a 50-minute hour. I have them sit on the couch and we talk about things I may explore what happened in their childhood. That square room is the therapeutic encounter. We've been suggesting now that the therapeutic encounter may not be that structure, but may be a restorative portal where you and the therapist go through the same portal of reconstructing the restoration of your wellness. Now, here's what to me is exciting. The therapeutic portal doesn't be in a building at the hospital. The therapeutic portal could be at the park. Think about this. When I was growing up, old men would get to the park and they get to the table and they play dominoes. And they'd be slapping the dominoes and doing all this trash, what I look at trash talk. But what in fact was going on is that the old men were saying, you got to bring me your best. I'm not going to dominate you. I'm not going to dehumanize you. I'm going to encourage you to bring me your best. So I lay my stuff down. You got to top that. Now that process right there of bring me your best, as opposed to something wrong with you because you're losing, is a therapeutic portal. So all those old men were doing therapy with each other that we didn't see because we didn't look at it from our African perspective. We just look at old men with their pants well creased and the hats on the side and slapping the table as having this game, and maybe had a half a pint of gin on the ground by the ankle. We saw all that. We didn't see that healing is to activate your own self-healing potential. That's an African thought. We have in our DNA the ability to self-heal, but we have to activate it. And the way we activate it, I hope I come back to that, is something in the Bantu called, I think you know, it's called Zola. And Zola is love. It's not no romantic love. Zola is the instigation, the activating of electromagnetic energy that activates healing. Well, that's science to me. And that's what we're going to take and be to look at more formally. How do we capture that and formalize that so that we can have young people understand that even when you're on a school bus, you can have a therapeutic encounter that makes you more better. Even when you're in the grocery store, you can have a therapeutic encounter that makes you more better. Even when you are actually talking to your court-appointed therapist, because you don't get hooked up with the law, and then you get to go see him. If he's the right person, that therapeutic encounter will be one of making you activate your self-healing potential. And that's it. Let's talk about what happened to you let's talk about what happens to you when you see a white man. All that stuff is sort of surface level. We got a little deep on this. I think, Asa, you might be in a therapeutic portal right now. You're just resonating and holding on to the energy vibration. Or maybe you don't hear me. Yeah, I think he doesn't hear me. Mm-hmm. You're going to go correct here. Huh?
This being recorded.
Uh-huh.
Baba, you there?
I'm here. Did you hear what I was saying?
I'm coming in on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. I think there was a power outage, and so the internet just went out, and I'm waiting for it to come back on. So I'm on my phone. So please forgive me as I.
Everything is everything. Just figure out the moves.
I think it's COINTELPRO trying to stop the conversation. So we'll do. Always got an alternative, and we'll make this happen. So, alrighty. So I just have to use my plan. Okay, good. So I didn't hear anything like when I went out, based upon what you said.
Yeah,
but
basically what I was trying to suggest is that when we see the therapeutic encounter as the clinician who is well and the client who is sick, and they got to work together in that encounter. And what I'm suggesting, based upon African thought, is that there is co-healing going on. There's that we heal each other in the encounter, and rather than think of a square room in an office building, we should think about portals of restorative wellness. So when I'm in this portal with another, that I'm now they helping me to restore my wellness, I'm helping them to restore their wellness. So the clinician ain't falling. I'm sick. It's that the two encounters. They're in this portal. I like to use the term portal because the portal takes it out of the square building in an office place or in the emergency room at a hospital somewhere. The portal could be anywhere that we come together and we activate our self-healing potential. And I was giving an example of old men playing dominoes at the park.
Yes.
And when they play dominoes, they be slapping the dominoes, and they're not slapping dominoes and say, I'm going to beat your butt. They're slapping the dominoes and say, you got to bring me your best. Don't come here with no raggedy stuff. You got to bring me your best. Bringing me your best is self-healing. See, and so the idea that you have the capacity to be better than that when you sit down at that bench, you got a capacity to be even better than that. And that's self-healing. So I'm encouraging my colleagues to think about these portals of engagement where both, in quote, the client and the therapist heal each other. We've also introduced different terminology. For instance, I just said client and client and therapist. But if you look at the person who's supposedly coming for help as a client, there's an artificial separation from you and him. So we went back and reached and get some terminology out of our own tradition called Bwana Mboti. Bwana Mboti is the child of my ancestors. So if I'm sitting beside somebody who's come for, in quote, therapy, and I look across the room and that's a child of my ancestors, there's a different relationship now that we got to work with. As opposed to, that's a court-appointed client. That's somebody that the judge said, I got to give them 50 minutes and then write a note saying, put them in jail or take them to therapy. So just changing the language of who we are transitions us into a different framework. And even though while the Nganga is a long-term development of people who walk both in the invisible realm and the visible realm, we should think about our therapists as being moving to become Ngangas and not therapists. Ngangas where they, in fact, tap into the visible and the invisible in order to orchestrate what is the healing bomb going to be. So now we can take, again, some new stuff in Black psychology, at least out here what we're working on, that the therapeutic encounter becomes a portal of co-healing. The players in that therapist encounter become family. That's a child of my ancestors. I'm an Nganga. I'm supposed to tap into both the visible and the invisible to help the child of my ancestors, because that's family. You see, so we got to start playing around with these ideas and then put them into practice. Test them out. See if it makes a difference. See if it works, and then formalize it. This thing I mentioned earlier about this, what we call TNR, the therapist in residency. Think about if all the chapters of ABC all over the country had a therapist in residency program where we took the authority of educating and training the next generation of healers all over this country in African stuff. not in that Western white stuff. They're gonna go figure out how they can modify it, make it kind of work, make sure I don't get fired because the supervisors don't know what we're doing. We could be playing drums in the therapy room, but sure, the supervisor might fire you because you're playing drums up in there. But drums is vibratory energy. Drums is vibratory energy. So how do we use that as the technology? You see, so there's science in this technology, and the technology is the ability to apply the understanding of the science. If we have a science of Black psychology, what is the technology that's going to apply the understanding of that science? That's where I think we are now in terms of at least some ones of us in the association are now struggling, grappling with. And we don't got it. We don't. It's not there yet. It's like we got we can pop our collars and stuff. No, it is that fact we're working through understanding this. If I can go back to your question about COVID-19 and people being traumatized by it. You got to marry COVID with white supremacy 19 because the traumatizing is not just that I might get this virus and it might kill me. We are born in this country with a pre-existing disease. It's the ailment of being victimized by white supremacy. So all our inabilities, all our disabilities can be traced to, ideologically, can be traced to being the victims of white supremacy. So everything we hear, look at the data. Every state across saying that Black folks are getting it more and dying more. What's that about? Why is Black getting it more and dying more? Everywhere. And it has to do with that. What we're getting more and dying more is that our precondition is the victims of white supremacy. Look at. If I did not talk about, let's develop some action plans, some response teams in our computer. Let's deploy response teams, psychological, mental health response teams in our communities given COVID. If we deploy them and we don't identify the fact that white supremacy is an airborne illness, then we miss the ability to help our people cope with this issue. Now, we still have haunting in us the Tuskegee experiments. Old Black folks said, well, I'm not so sure about running up here and getting white folks to help me now. Because I remember what they did with syphilis. I don't know what's going on with it. So we have to be historical and political and scientific as emergency response teams. And we can never overlook white supremacy as a caste. It's not racist. There's a caste system in America, and that caste system places us as the wretched, as the unworthy. And so people do all things around disregarding and disrespecting us because we're in that caste. There's a sister named Elizabeth Wilkerson, who just wrote a book called Caste in America. Isabel Wilkerson. I would encourage you to have your readers look at it. It's important because she shows the same parallel between the caste in India and the caste in the United States. And we are the untouchables, but we are the ones who are disrespected, disregarded, unwanted, unworthy on the bottom of the caste system.
I want to go back to the healing modalities that you mentioned earlier. This is something that I want to, have a discussion with, AB Psy at some point in the near future. But, my comparative African philosophy and religion and linguistic work has, motivated me to not coin the term, but to utilize and try to institutionalize the term kimoyo. And kimoyo, coming out of the Bakongo tradition as given to us by Fukuyao, is really like this art of regeneralization. He calls it, dynamo vitality. And so moyo being the word for heart, mind, spirit, life, vitality. Mm-hmm. And so at the heart of Kimoyo, this is the term that I use now to refer to the African wisdom traditions as a particular type of paradigm that separates what I've studied in regards to what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Asia. Is the thing that distinguishes the Africans is what I call Kimoyo. I have a whole, lesson in that. But at the heart of it is this fundamental notion of open-hearted sharing. And I've traced words for love in Africa, including Ma'at, to a more fundamental root, meaning to share food. And this, it goes into this concept of Kimoyo in terms of this interchange of vital forces, I'm saying, between, two or more entities. And, so everything that you were saying just kind of reinforces this notion in terms of, the client, so to speak, being the child of, my ancestors. And that, and even when you were speaking, Gabon, you learning from, younger up and coming, psychologists in the field, that it's always an exchange of vitality,
yes.
That goes on. And that's part of the healing process, and, and the environment is very true. Like I remember some elders, they invited me to a meeting. They wanted me to come and be a part of this organization. They gave me an address. I go to the space, I'm looking all up and down the street for this address. There's no address. It's just a field and a big tree, in the field. And so, I park, and, then, the elders come up a little later. So I'm a bit early. And so I'm like, I can't find the address. They're like, this is the address. We meet under this tree, under here. And so, I'm sitting there with a gang of elders, and, they're schooling me on some things, some various local history and stuff to this nature. But that was the meeting space, for the healing. And so we could have met any kind of building,
Sure.
or something to this nature, but they chose nature and the tradition of meeting, saying under a large tree. And, so there's these things that we're still holding on to, unknowingly, that's tradition, carried over from the continent, meeting under the big tree.
Yes. And that, again, that we bury that with modern terms. There's a science and there's a technology. The technology is how do you do it? How do you do science? So the technology, using your example, is that you get to surround that big tree. And the tree is not just a symbol of tree. The tree is a symbol of that which nurtures life. And so your healing portal, your information exchange is around the idea of supporting life. And even when you said a little while ago about exploring all the different Kakongo words for love, that it boils down to giving someone, feeding someone food. Yes. But you got to go deeper than food. It's not just food. It is that which sustains life.
Exactly.
Give them what sustains life if you're going to heal. Love, Zola, love activates the ability of that which sustains life to do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. I know our time is short, and we're coming up on there. So I wanted to ask an audience question. And actually, this question comes from one of our Patreon members. Mr. Chris Marshall asked, can you break down the concept of mimetic ideations from your book, Island of Memes? And where did you develop that concept? Or how did you develop that concept?
How did I develop the concept? Look, there is still, the ancestors gave it to me. I mean, I don't think that I own anything. I think information and ideas come through me. And then I have to try to retrofit that with the technology we've been taught, Who are your references? Who did you cite? Where did you find it from? And then that's not what I really do. I do that as an after action. But the fact of the matter is that ideas, information come through me. There are things called structural information structures that we possess in our DNA. They're in every single cell of our being. I've simply married that idea of the structural information with the notion of meme. Meme is an ideation that replicates itself. Now, the young people are taking memes and made it like a little cartoon thing, but it's not. It's not the cartoon. It is the ideation, the idea that replicates itself, and in so doing generates behavior that supports it. You know, niggas ain't shit is a meme, and as soon as I internalize that, I engage in behavior that reinforces my disregard for other black people. That's what the mimetic ideation does, and that's what I want us to look at. Is that the things that are important, excuse me, in terms of psychology, is consciousness and identity. Consciousness has to do with how you are aware of and know all of reality. Identity is how you are placed in time and space, are recognized and placed in time and space. See, our identity has been damaged because they made black identity something that's negative, deviant. So we struggling with, you all know this, for a long time, we struggle with call ourselves. Are we colored? Are we Negro? Are we Bilalians? Are we Afro, Afriques? All this stuff is about how I am identified in time and space. But the consciousness has to do with how I am aware of knowing. And that knowing is not just limited to the visible reality, it's also to the invisible reality. That's why I say we have to begin to broker. And as you know, in Congo, there's the Kalunga line, and the Kalunga line separates the invisible from the visible. Well, the Kalunga line is something that we have to figure out how to cross back and forth. We don't. First of all, we don't even understand we can do that, but we can, in terms of playing around with this science. And so the memes are really ideation, ideas that replicate themselves and determine behavior to reinforce them. You can say, well, all the ideas people have about black people, or for that matter, all the ideas black people have about black people. We look at our metaphors and our proverbs, it's all mimetic ideation. People say, niggas ain't shit. Black folk throw back at them, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice is a mimetic ideation that reinforces the integrity and the essence of our goodness. You see? So we got to go dig into these things better than that. So that's what that would be, is to look at these ideas. I said a long time ago, ideas are the substance of behavior. Ideas are the substance of behavior. We've been walking around under substance abuse, meaning we've had only white ideas that govern our behavior, to the point we reject our own selves, run away from our own selves because we got these ideas of white supremacy. You see, so mimetic ideation are ideas of the substance of behavior, but the idea replicates itself. We can now go back and look at our family dynamics and see how do we address our children. If we address our children in very toxic and negative ways, you no good, you ugly, you just like your old no good daddy. That's mimetic ideation that's getting ingrained in the child's consciousness that replicates itself and governs their behavior. You know, how come we don't have a good relationship with men? You know, that's the analysis we're going to do. Before we get out, I need to do two things, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
One is that during this COVID, the ABSI created under my leadership a workbook for dealing with this COVID isolation. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's hard to do that.
I made your screen bigger.
Yeah, it's called While Sheltering in Space. And it has really this idea that there are things that we should do with each other as family. There's not no individual medicine, as family, that allows us to deal with this COVID isolation, danger, fear, etc. And one is to enhance the dynamic of family during and after the time of dread, this time. And so we've laid out several things that we think, and the steps that I can send this to you, Asa, if you wanted to share with your readers. But it's a workbook. Yes. And it allows us to deal with 5 stars: remember, remind, reframe, revitalize, and reward. We have to remember who we are. We have to remind ourselves of what is going on in the real specific ways. We have to revitalize by standing on our vitality as spirit beings. And there's steps for how people do this. And then we have to reward the goodness in us. How do we reward? How do we collect ideas and thoughts? Have family discussions about what did so-and-so do that made you feel powerful? We talk about, well, in family conversations, we talk about, oh, so-and-so didn't do this, didn't do that. We never sit down and talk about reward the goodness in songs. Have children write, they do hip-hop, have them write a hip-hop song that talks about the divinity and the goodness of Black people, and then enact that in the family meeting. And then there's the ability to engage in how do we intentionally resurrect our communities as places of vitality. This is a time where we're sheltered in place to spend time in this incubator to begin to rescue our stuff. And one of the ways we rescue stuff is something I've also rescued that came through me from the ancestors called Moko Jumbi. You all know the Moko Jumbi is the still walker. The still walker.
Yeah.
The Moko Jumbi is the still walker. We've been taught through the Western lens that's just entertainment during carnival. And we have all this nice music playing and women around drinking rum and coke, and the still walkers are going around. But the still walkers in actuality were spirit beings. They were spirit beings, and they were raised up high. That's the long pole, raised up high so they could see far, far away that evil is coming, that the enemies are coming. That's one leg. And they can raise up on high and see the other leg that here's the medicine that we need. So I'm offering to Black psychologists now, let's think about how do we take the idea of the Moko Jumbi duality and make that a prescription. That when we're engaging in working with families or doing in-service training with Black folks in these institutions that are suffering because all the regulations make them be conspirators with the destruction of Black. How do we help them say that you can say, let's do the Moko Jumbi on these, let's Moko Jumbi on them. And Moko Jumbi is identify what is it that is there. The one leg is the decolonization of our minds. That's one leg of the Moko Jumbi, decolonization of our minds. So in dynamic, I gotta remind myself, left leg, brother, left leg. You gotta decolonize your mind if you're gonna deal with this issue. Then another time, right leg, brother, right leg, brother. That's the other leg. And the other leg is the intentional affirmation of being African. So here we got two to still walker, high up. One task is to decolonize our mind. The second task is to affirm being African. See, that becomes now a strategy. And we all have, oh, we can run these Chinese, they speak language, we don't understand what they say. Well, we can take our African language, and you are critical here, Asar, to give us the terminology, take our African tongue. And when things get strange, all we're going to say is, Moko Jumbi up on them. Or Zolo up on we. Zolo is activating self-healing potential of our self-healing potential to be well. Well, I can say, wait a minute, Asar, you slipping here. Zola up on we. Remind you, activate your self-healing potential. Or you're getting ready to be promoted to the director of some ward in an insane asylum that has only Black folk. I can say to you, Moko Jumbi, you can go in there, you can't go in there doing what? You're gonna go in there decolonizing your mind and affirming African if we're gonna heal our people. See, so there are things that we can begin to do and work through, and they besides several folks, cluster folk doing that. You know, in terms of back to earlier about rising stars, there are rising clusters that I want to announce. There's this Black Therapy Central down in North Carolina, with small groups of Black therapists are talking about they're going to intentionally use African thought and African-centered therapy to work with our community. Black Therapy Central. There's a group in South Florida, the Haitian think tank. They're doing a Saku collective under me where they're studying my work and then try to translate that work into what practices they do with the Haitian community. Overlapping that thing, you know, we got something in Haiti that's even better draw from what's called voodoo. But we don't do with that voodoo because voodoo is due. We're afraid of voodoo, but we got to pick that voodoo up and look at that as a technology. And then we got to look at, again, I mentioned the thing about the therapist in residency. We got three chapters now starting in California, Los Angeles, Bay Area, and San Diego that are beginning to formalize having a therapist in residency process in their chapters so they take responsibility for training the next generation of African Ngangas. We're working with our Bwana and Botis. See, so the stuff we're not done. We're not. We can't raise the success flag yet, but I think we're in a better place than we were 50 years ago when we first started ABSI, which is to try to figure out how to get white folks to acknowledge us. White folks ain't even on the agenda. we have to live. They're on the agenda since they're dangerous, so we can't be foolish now. Just think they're gonna do what they do. They're gonna do what they do. The trick is we got to do what we do, and not do a black version of what they do. So I'm all for us doing what we do.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
There are tools and strategies and the process we're trying to create. I can send you both this
yes, please.
Sheltering in Place and the Moko Jumbi duality that you can begin to think about and maybe share with your audience.
Yes, I'll upload it to my website and I'll put the link in the description, for people to download it. And so, yes, there's so much to cover, of course, in so little time. And I just wanted to remind the audience that Dr. Wade Nobles is also in the film Hoppy. We didn't get a chance to really get into that film and, what it's about. But of course, if y'all have been, following me, you know that I am in that film, as well as a whole host of great and phenomenal people. And they will be having another screening on November the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So go to the hoppyfilm.com website and get your tickets. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry.
Asa, if I may, that Hoppy film is very important. And there are deep thinkers on that Hoppy film that says it's not a film, it is a prescription. That we have to, don't go watch Hoppy film with your popcorn and your soda pop because you're going to see a movie. No, go to watch Hoppy because there's so much gems coming out of that film that people got to pick up and meditate on, think about, then ask, how do I translate this into what I do? It is important that people, I really encourage people to look at the film, but look at it very carefully and intently about what lessons can I pull up out of it and apply it to where I live, how I relate with my family, how I deal and walk in the streets that I walk on.
Indeed. And, the film is about the role of economics in the building of civilization. And, as Dr. Amos Wilson, would always stress, that economics first begins with relationships between people. And I think the role of, Black psychology as a field of study and, of course, an institution, and just the practical paradigms in that helps us to build better relationships so that we trust one another to solve each other's problems.
Yes. Therefore,
extending our hands to pay and build an economic system, based on that trust that we develop, understanding, who we are and our obligations to community. And, these are the kinds of ideas that are talked about in the film and the subsequent interviews. There are a lot of interviews with members of the cast. So I encourage everyone to view those to get some extended, insight into the topics that was raised in the film. And so, I thank you greatly, for joining us today. And I just want to say this, before you go. And I want to start getting like an award made or something, to certain people who we label, who I would label a warrior scholar in a very real sense. And so, in a tradition of like the Adinkras and the hieroglyphs, we're beginning a project called Mbongi to create African American, our own Adinkra symbols that have sayings and teachings associated with it. And so this is one of them. And the sign is called Egbunu Ogu Akukwo. It is an Igbo word for warrior, reader, scholar. And the proverb or phrase or the meaning of the sign is Ibunuji Isi Eje Ogu. Ram uses head to go fight war. The English translation is brave ram who fights with his head. And that means, further meaning, to fight fearlessly with both courage and intellect. And I think you are the personification of that. And I just want to show this sign. I want to make something of this and give it to you.
Thank you so much. And always dig deeper, because we can slip into European thought.
Yeah,
the idea of the ram using his head, it ain't my physical head.
Yeah, your Ori Inu.
That's what you fight with, not the physical head. They can crack my head very easily. They can't crack my inner head.
Exactly, but that's why the ram's horn, because it's a hard thing to penetrate, But that was a phrase that was given to Shekinah Joe by an Igbo scholar. And I wanted
to accept that, and I will use it not as an award, but as a reminder of what I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
It's prominent in my library.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank everyone who is listening live, and of course all of you who are listening on the archives. And please visit the website of our guest, Dr. Wade Nobles. You can find more information about, his works, what he's doing there. How else can they, are you, on other social media platforms, or?
My reach doesn't go that far.
Okay, I see.
I depend upon you, people like you. I depend upon you.
Indeed. Well, make sure y'all visit drwadenobles.com and check out, the various ABSI groups. They have, talks and interviews and discussions, regularly now on Facebook and YouTube. And, if you can, go to, one of the conferences when we start, getting out the meeting, and to see these scholars live, and sit at the feet and have these conversations and bring that information back, internalize it, and utilize it within your family sphere, and this is how we spread this information and make it practical and a living tradition, for us all. So any last words that you have for us?
Zola up on we. Activate our self-healing potential. Every day. Zola up on we.
Indeed. Well, thank you again. And I will see everyone else on tomorrow night at 9 for, our controversial talks on should we let Christianity and Islam into Wakanda, and the context for that will be explained, further on tomorrow, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So y'all have a blessed day. Continue to wear your.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I'm sorry.
I said thank you so very much for the invitation.
Thank you for coming again. It's always a pleasure.
Another 20 years for the next one.
No doubt. I know you're a very busy person. We don't want to
I understand.
take you away from the work, saying all the time to answer our questions, and so, I take this, with great honor, and I don't take this lightly, and I listen intently, and I'm looking for those things. Okay, how can I incorporate this? And, just keep and expand the work that y'all are doing. So again, thank everyone for listening, and thank you. And peace and blessings to you, you and your family. And of course, we have to mention your lovely wife,
yes.
In that whole sphere, and appreciate everyone. So with that said, we are out. Y'all have a blessed day. All right.